Leather embroidery. Is it worth ruining your $200 jacket for a couple stitches? Well, actually, you don't have to ruin it. In today's episode, you're going to find out how you can make it work. But before we dive into the deep, dark, unknown worlds of leather embroidery, let's cover some channel basics. If you're new here, welcome to our channel. If you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and click subscribe. For those of you who have already subscribed, thank you so much for tuning in. Now, if you have any questions at all about leather or embroidery on leather or really anything at all, then leave us a comment and we'll get back to you with an answer. So when embroidering on leather, you're going to need to make a few considerations with the materials that you're using. So I'm going to start off talking about the fabric. Now, the most common type of leather is chrome tanned leather, and that just so happens to be the best leather for machine embroidery. So that's step one. Step two is your hooping technique. Now, this might be the most important part of any embroidery, but especially leather embroidery. So let's talk about hooping leather really quickly. Now, the main problem that comes with hooping leather is the fear of your leather getting marked. Now, higher quality leathers are not going to run that chance of getting marked by the hoop as much as lower quality leathers, but I don't recommend hooping leather with a traditional hoop. Instead, I recommend using specialty hoops like your magnetic hoops, which help protect against hoop burn and are good for those thicker materials like leather. And then also we have our hoop tech, our clamps. If you have clamps, you can try hooping your leather with the clamps because it's going to have less stress on the fabric than your traditional hoops are. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about the clamps, we actually have a video on that I will link here. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested. You can also float your leather with specialty hoops like the 8-in-1 device if your leather is light enough. But I would recommend sticking to your magnetic hoops, maybe your clamps. But if you don't have a specialty hoop, which is probably what you guys are thinking, well, what do I do if I don't have a specialty hoop? Well, you can use your traditional hoop, okay? But you're gonna need to take a few steps to avoid marking the fabric. Now, step one is going to be creating a barrier between the leather and the hoop. And you can do this with a piece of fabric. You can use a piece of fabric called muslin, and that will help create a barrier between the leather and the hoop. If you're using your magnetic hoops, your mighty hoops, it's not 100% guaranteed that you're not going to mark your leather. So I recommend using the muslin and the magnetic hoops. That is going to be your best solution for not marking your fabric with your leather. Now you can also float your leather over your hoop. And what I mean by floating, for those of you who are new here or new to embroidery, what I mean by that is just hooping your stabilizer and then actually grabbing the fabric, the leather fabric, and just putting it on top instead of hooping it together with the stabilizer. You're just going to lay it on top. And how you can get the fabric to adhere to the stabilizer, you can use pins, you can use temporary adhesive spray, or you can use a combination of two. And obviously, pro tip is don't leave your leather in the hoop for longer than it has to be. You know, just once you hoop it, get it in, embroider it, and unhoop it. Don't leave it in for longer. Don't wait, because you don't want to run that risk of ruining it. Next up, let's talk about design choice. Now, obviously, we're going to want to choose light designs because with leather, what can happen, and you don't want this to happen, is that if you have a very high stitch count design, your leather can actually just pop right out of your garment. And you can have a nice little leather cutout that has stitches on it. But we don't want that to happen. So you want to choose your light designs, and you want to make sure that it is backed very well. And we'll get into that in just a minute. So obviously, when you're embroidering on leather, we want to keep the amount of holes in your fabric to a minimum. So we're going to want to choose lower density designs, lower stitch count designs, and designs that have longer stitches. Longer stitches are going to help to decrease the needle perforations in the fabric. So obviously that means stay away from your dense fills, stay away from your satin stitches, because you do run a chance of ruining your fabric by opening too many holes in it. So what have we learned More holes, bad. Less holes, good. In this case, less is more. Real smart embroiderers have a super pro tip for you about digitizing. Now, even if you're not doing your own digitizing, you should still know this, okay? You need to communicate to your digitizer that you want to start from the true starting point. And what that means is that not a lot of designs start from the true starting point. They start from the center. And what that does is that it adds another needle perforation. And we learned that we want less needle perforations. So tell them to start from the true starting point, and that will help our cause. So now let's cover stabilizer. What stabilizer do we use? Now, in Embroidery 101, you probably learned that if you have a thicker garment, then you can use a tearaway stabilizer. And if you have a thinner, less stable garment, then go ahead and use a cutaway stabilizer. But in the case of leather, that should not be applied. You should use a stabilizer like cutaway that is going to give you more stability for your stitches, especially if you have stitches, higher stitch count designs that need the support to be able to perforate through the fabric. However, as embroidery is a craft, you can try what works for you. If you really, really want to use a tearaway, then make sure that you're using a strong, stable tearaway that will support your stitches very well, and that your design is not a high stitch count design, and it's a very simple, light design. So last but not least, let's clear up the debate about what needle to use with your leather embroidery. Now, a lot of it will depend on what type of leather you're using, but I did want to talk about wedge point needles, which are your leather needles if you haven't heard of them yet. And I want to give you guys some tips on choosing a wedge point needle. Now, a lot of wedge point needles out there, most of them are for sewing operations, not for machine embroidery. And those needles can actually cause damage to when embroidering. So make sure that if you are buying a leather needle, a wedge point needle it's called, make sure that you're buying a machine embroidery one, because that is the one you're going to want to use. There's an organ one out there that they have on Ostitch. I'm sure they sell it in other places as well. That's safe for machine embroidery. Now, if you don't want to buy a leather needle, you don't need to. You can use your sharp point needles. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the properties of leather, whether you want to use sharp point or ball point, and what size needle you want to use, depending on the type of fabric. So if you have a stiff or spongy leather, then you're going to want to use a 7511 or 8012 max ballpoint needle on this type of leather, because the ballpoint will actually help guard against flagging. However, if you're embroidering on thinner or softer leather, then I recommend using a sharp point needle, either a 7010, an 8012, a 7511, anything in that category is a safe zone for a needle to use on softer, thinner leather. All right, so there you have it. You have all the tips and tools for success on your leather embroidery. If you guys go ahead and try that out, then let me know how it turned out. So I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please make sure to hit the thumbs up button below and to subscribe to our channel. And I also want to urge you guys to sign up for our newsletter. I have linked it below. If you want to get email updates on our content sent to your inbox, then that's the perfect place to sign up. Next off, before we leave, I just want to invite you guys to our Facebook group, Embroidery and Custom Apparel Mastery. In there, you can talk to me and thousands of other embroiderers, ask any questions that you have, share any knowledge that you have. So go ahead and join the group. I have linked it below, and I'll see you guys in the group. Thank you for watching. Bye.